Are y'all not tired of having the same conversations in this community over and over and over again? Because I'm kind of tired and I don't even participate in most of the conversations. But today I feel like I have something to say because I am really, really fed up of the whole classics conversations. As somebody who doesn't read classics, I have a lot to say. I don't need to recap most of the things that have been happening around this conversation. Like, there's been a lot of discussion over the past couple of weeks because of the Disrupt Text movement and because of Just Clueless and other situations that have been happening in this conversation. I'm not going to be recapping any of that. If you haven't really been familiar with what's going on, basically the conversation of whether classics are necessary has propped up yet again in the book community. And some people are saying that, we need to move on from reading the same classics over and over and mix it up and read more diversely, read more modern classics, while other people are pushing back and saying, no, we need to continue reading the classics that we've already been reading, especially when it comes to like school curriculum and that kind of stuff. This conversation has many layers to it, and I'm going to be trying to address four aspects of it that have been really boiling in my mind. The first aspect of the conversation is whether classics are necessary or not. And the answer is quite simply yes, they are, and no, they are not. It depends. Necessity is subjective. Each individual is different. What might be necessary for you might not be necessary for me. I don't know why that is one of the most difficult things for people in the book community to grasp. I feel like people in the book community think that just because that they enjoy a particular genre of literature, that everybody else must appreciate and value that literature to the same extent that they do. It literally makes no sense. If I don't care to read a particular genre of literature, it is not necessary for me. I don't read fantasy because I don't care to read fantasy. Fantasy is therefore not necessary for me. I don't read romance because I don't care to read romance. Romance is therefore unnecessary for me. That does not mean that it is unnecessary in general. I am not daft enough to think that because I don't care for romance, or because I don't care for fantasy, or because I might not see the value in those genres as much as other people, I'm not daft enough to sit down here and think that because I don't care for those genres, that they are irrelevant because I don't care for them. Like, I love literary fiction. Literary fiction is my favorite thing to read. I also love YA contemporary. Those are like my two main favorite genres, sci-fi to a less extent. But I'm not going to sit here and think that they are necessary and that everybody must read these genres just because I like them or just because I prefer them. And that is the same thing with classics. A lot of y'all who love classics, who read classics, genuinely think that classics are more necessary than they actually are. They are necessary for you if you like them, if you study them, if you're doing your thesis on a classic book, if you are a reviewer who reviews classics, if you are just somebody who loves classics just for the sake of loving them. They are necessary for you, but that does not mean that they are necessary for me. We're not the same people. So that's the first thing. Necessity is subjective and it really depends on the person and the individual. So stop trying to push the narrative that classics are necessary for people who don't think it's necessary. For people who don't think it's necessary, it's not necessary. Deal with it. The next aspect of the conversation, the whole idea that, people should not criticize classics for, reproducing old ideologies because a lot of classics were transgressive for the time. And this is another thing that people in the online community in general, people in general in life, fail to grasp, and that is that two things could be right at the same time. Yes, a lot of these classics were transgressive and did push back, and did push the envelope to some extent. But that does not mean that they were not reproducing some of the other problematic ideologies that existed at the time. Just because you have a classic that might have addressed sexism, right, does not mean that said classic was not reproducing racism and homophobia. There's really nothing more I could say for that. Like, when I come and I criticize a book or a classic for saying that it was racist or it was homophobic, or that, older books or classics tend to reproduce ideologies that I'm not comfortable with. If I say that, please don't come and try to tell me about how you read Jane Eyre and it was feminist or what. Shut up. The next thing that I want to talk about is the misconceptions that people have around inclusion, and this doesn't have to do with classics alone. It just has to do with like everything in general. Some of y'all genuinely think that including something that has never been included before equates to excluding things that have already been included. Let me make it simple for you. Let's say that there are two people in a room, and I feel like there should be more people in the room, other than those two people. Those two people are fine. It's great that they're already there, but there should be more people in the room. So I open the door and I let two more people in the room. It does not mean that the two people who were already there need to leave. It means that now there are four people in the room. I am not replacing the people. I'm simply adding more people. And that's what the inclusion is all about. It's about including people and including things that have never been included before, whilst not excluding the things that have already been there. It's about adding to what has already been there. So the whole conversation about including more modern classics or more diverse classics on the curriculum is great, because y'all need more modern classics and diverse classics on y'all American curriculum. Y'all America needs so much right now. I don't even want to start on America right now. But at the very least, y'all could do with a couple more, modern, diverse classics on your curriculum compared to what has already been there. At least as far as I know, based on the conversations that I've seen people having, right? There seems like it's a need for more modern and more diverse classics on the curriculum. That does not mean that we need to start banning Jane Austen and Jane Eyre and all the Janes. It does not mean that we need to take Fitzgerald off of the curriculum or anything like that. It simply means to include more modern and diverse classics that are often overlooked because of, racism, sexism, homophobia, etc., etc. It's about including the things that have been overlooked and that have not been included before. It's not about getting rid of or, banning or obscuring or completely yeeting, right, as the young people would say, the things that have already been there before. So please, try to grasp that, put that in your thick skull, and really, let it stew in your brain for, 2 seconds before you accuse people of trying to, exclude, I don't know, freaking, I can't even think of any classic authors' names right now, honestly. Ernest Hemingway. I don't know what the fuck he write, but it's not about excluding him, right? And the thing about it is, yes, when you include some of the new, modern classics and whatnot, and you include more stuff, you might kind of have to, let this stuff that has already been there take a little backseat. You might have to put it on the back burner for a little bit, because there'll be more books to focus on. I'm aware of that. But listen, these books that y'all been reading for the past 50 million centuries, y'all have been praising them with no limits whatsoever. These white people books that y'all love, that y'all worship, y'all have been praising these books for very, very long. So I think it's okay if some of them take a little step back and, go on the back burner for a little bit and let somebody else whose story has been overlooked or has not been paid attention to take the limelight for a little bit. And the authors are dead, so it's not like they'll give a fuck. I'm sure Jane Austen is not going to subtweet anybody for not reading her books. And it's Jane Austen, so she'll be fine. People will continue to read and buy. Literally, people are still buying the 50th million reprinted edition of her book till this day. So don't try to act like if what the conversation is doing is harmful to these books that have already cemented themselves as iconic and foundational, and that people are all over the world are reading. That is not going to affect their fan base or their appreciation or whatever merit they've managed to achieve. The final point in this rant that I have to make has to do with American centrism, and I do plan on making a video about Euro and American centrism in the bookish online community eventually, and by extension global North centrism. But just for the sake of this particular conversation, I don't really give a fuck about most of y'all's classics. I really don't. I'm not American. I'm not European. I'm not from America. I'm not from Europe. I have nothing to do with y'all. Y'all have nothing to do with me. I am a brown person from the Caribbean, and as much as there might be value in books like, Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre or Great Expectations for me, because, all books are universal to some extent, no matter where they're written in or what time or who wrote it and who's reading it. All books are universal, and all readers could find anything to relate to in all books, for sure, right? But even with that in mind, there are books that are more culturally and geographically and historically relevant to me as a brown person from the Caribbean than these old dead white people. And I really think that we really need to do a better job at decentering whiteness in our lives, particularly us as black and brown people and non-white people. I'm not talking to the white people. Y'all can do whatever the fuck y'all want. I don't care. But for people who are not white, we really, 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 it's up to us. It's not up to these white. We can't expect anything from them. It's up to us to decenter whiteness in our lives as much as we can. And for me, that means whenever I'm ready to read classic literature, because I don't read classic literature at all, but whenever I'm ready to start reading more classic literature, I'm going to start from home. I'm going to be reading Caribbean authors. I will be reading V.S. Naipaul and Olive Senior and other classic Caribbean writers. I am not going to be reading white people, dead white people, because they have nothing to do with me. I might read them eventually, right? I might get around to Persuasion when I'm like 45. When I am ready to jump into classics, I'm going to be reading the ones that are more culturally and geographically and politically relevant to me as a brown person in the Caribbean. And I refuse to subscribe to the idea that these white European classics or these white American classics are foundational and that I must start with those and that's the literature that I must up. No. You had to miss me with that stupidness. No. I will read those books when I'm in my 50s and 60s, but for now I will be focusing on the books that are more relevant to me. That's going to be it for this discussion. I'm starting to sweat profusely and y'all don't need to see that. So in the comments down below, if you have any thoughts on this discussion, please let me know. Feel free to completely and wholeheartedly disagree with me, it's fine. And yeah, that's everything I need to say. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.